just how authoritarian this Republican Party has become. We have Ken Paxton in Texas right now, who is looking to have Beto O'Rourke jailed. Can you explain this update and whether there's actually any legitimate justification for him to make this move?
All right, so this all stems from the fact that Beto was raising money to help the Texas Democrats who have left the state to break quorum. I'll skip over the exact mechanics of how that was taking place, the vehicles and the like, but just know that he was raising money for this. And then Ken Paxton went to a state court judge of his choosing to get an injunction preventing Beto from raising money to essentially pay the expenses of these Texas legislators to live out of state, to pay their expenses living out of state and fines. And after that, Beto gave a speech at a rally in which he urged people to continue to donate. But here's the thing. He doesn't, as I read it, say that it is to pay for those particular expenses. It's to say that these folks need resources to fight. And of course, they do need resources to fight. They need resources to fight, for example, in court, because Ken Paxton is suing them in court. They need resources to fight in court because, of course, Greg Abbott is suing them in court. So I think that this is a bit of a stunt on the part of Ken Paxton to try to intimidate his political opponents, in this case, Beto O'Rourke, while also trying to chill the fundraising that might go towards these state legislators. But like most things involving Ken Paxton, it's not really on the up and up.
Can you offer some insight here into, I mean, this is a Republican Party that fell over itself, complaining, whining, bitching, and moaning over the fact that Donald Trump was rightfully held to account in the courts for all of his criminal behavior in the lead up to the 2024 election, including stealing classified documents from the White House, trying to prevent the certification of the electoral votes, and also meddling in the election in Georgia, among other crimes that he committed. And all of these Republicans fell over themselves because anything that happened against Donald Trump was evidence of the weaponization of government against a poor, defenseless Republican. But now, all of these same Republicans who were whining and complaining then are now looking to wield the government against their political opponents.
Yeah, look, the hypocrisy within the Republican Party is just unbelievable. I mean, you know, by the way, these are the same people right now who proclaim that they are afraid to walk outside on the streets of Washington, D.C. You know, some tough guy alpha males these are, right?
Yeah.
They're like cowering. I will tell you, I walk outside on those streets of Washington, D.C. and find it safe enough. But on this point, the hypocrisy actually goes even deeper. It is not just that these are the same Republicans who defended Donald Trump and, you know, insisted that the criminal justice system be ground to the halt to protect him, but they also defended him speaking out in ways that were directly contradicting court orders. Remember, he kept having to be admonished by judges, including the judge in New York, for what he was saying about jurors, what he was saying about the court, what he was saying about court personnel. And all we heard from the Republicans at that point was, oh, this is political speech. Oh, you can't limit what Donald Trump is saying because this is all tied up campaigns. Well, you know, what Beto O'Rourke is doing here is quintessential political speech, which is why I honestly have my doubts about whether this underlying order that barring him from speaking is even constitutional. But it is core First Amendment political speech. He's talking about politics. He's talking about a political issue that is the hottest political issue, certainly in the state of Texas, arguably the hottest political issue in the country. And here are the Republicans trying to shut down speech. You know, didn't they tell us that they were the party of free speech?
I seem to remember something along those lines, but a mere faint memory that's fading by the day. You know,
the other thing that you and I have talked about that makes this particularly hypocritical is that this is also a party that keeps defending its Department of Justice, that is constantly walking on the razor's edge of contempt.
Yeah.
You know, like, this is a party that knows something about contempt. Like, you know, it is constantly being admonished by judges for violating their court orders. So look, I think the Republicans here are going to weaponize everything they can to try to shut down discussion of the absolutely abhorrent behavior of the president, his, by the way, continued refusal to release the Epstein files, which he should release, but also the effort by the Republican Party here in Texas and elsewhere to try to, frankly, rig the outcome of the 2026 midterms because they know they can't win.
Mark, do you have any concern about Beto falling victim to some right-wing judge? I mean, most of the judges on the Texas Supreme Court were appointed by Greg Abbott himself, and these are all people that are hardline right-wing Republicans. And so, look, I understand that in an ideal world, these judges would actually follow the law, but we don't live in an ideal world. And so what's your level of worry that, as misguided as this lawsuit against Beto might be, that these political actors, that these partisans on the court, deferring to Ken Paxton and Greg Abbott might actually allow this farce to continue?
Yeah, look, I mean, of course I worry about it. And people come up to me all the time and ask me, am I worried that I'm going to, that I'm in the crosshairs of Donald Trump? And the answer is, yes, I'm worried. The question is, what do you do about it, right? So yeah. I'm sure Beto O'Rourke is worried about it. But the question is, what does he do, right? Does he stand back and say, I'm going to allow Ken Paxton to threaten me and to cause me so much fear that I will not advocate for the causes that I believe are just? I mean, earlier today I recorded an episode on my own podcast on Democracy Docket with Congresswoman MacIver from New Jersey, who is being criminally prosecuted by the Trump Justice Department for exercising her rights as a member of Congress, for visiting an ICE detention facility, as many of the viewers of this video will remember. And look, I think we live in the world in which we all have to assume, as terrible as it is, as dystopian as it is, that the price for standing up against Donald Trump, the price for standing up against Republicans in Texas, the price for standing up for fair districting may wind up being a politicized prosecutorial government that brings to bear the full weight and power of it against you. The members of the state legislature, let's remember, who are out of state right now, they're being threatened with arrest. So, yes, I am worried about this for Beto O'Rourke. I'm worried about it for the legislators. I'm worried about it for Congresswoman MacIver in New Jersey. I'm worried about it for Senator Padilla, who was tackled in California, and for the comptroller of New York, Lander, who was thrown to the ground in New York. I'm worried about it for Democrats and pro-democracy warriors all across this country.
If Beto does become the subject of a politicized prosecution in Texas, does he have any recourse by trying to jump into the federal court system that might be a little less inclined to defer to the Ken Paxtons and Greg Abbotts of the world?
Potentially, yes. Right. So there are a number of ways that you can challenge state court final action through the federal courts. It gets a little complicated and a little fact specific. But for example, if he was in fact jailed, right, he was taken into custody, you could file a habeas petition, right? So that's one way that you can collaterally attack or collaterally challenge state court action. But again, that's not a sure thing. And there are things, and that doesn't mean you won't be dragged through a whole lot of process in the meantime. And that assumes that the federal courts, by the way, in Texas and the Fifth Circuit are any better than the state Supreme Court of Texas, which, is not a sure thing either.
Mark, like 30,000-foot view here, we're 7 months into this administration, and we're already at the point where we have seen numerous Democratic officials and judges get arrested at the hands of this DOJ. We're watching as now Republican officials are seeking the arrest of their political opponents. How do you think about this in terms of the next 3.5 years under this Department of Justice, given what we've seen in such a short amount of time right now? I mean, I think that you and I can both agree that this is probably, like, as far as the weaponization of government is concerned and politicizing the DOJ is concerned, this is damn near close to worst case scenario. And so how are you looking at this, given the fact that we're only 6 months in?
Yeah, look, I'm worried. I'm very worried. And here's the thing, and I think everyone watching this will agree. You see it everywhere you turn. In fact, once you see it, you can't avert your eyes to it. That, frankly, Donald Trump and the Republican Party are unraveling our country's democracy. whether it is a bunch of teenage boys rummaging through federal agencies as acolytes to Elon Musk, whether it is Pam Bondi and the politicization of the Department of Justice to go after Donald Trump's political opponents, whether it is Kash Patel and Dan Bongino acting as if they never called for the release of the Epstein files and acting like they can just move on from that and no one will notice, or whether it is what Ken Paxton and Greg Abbott are doing in Texas, or what other Republican governors and AGs are threatening to do in redistricting elsewhere in the country. Whether it's the criminal prosecutions that are being threatened against these state legislators, or, as you point out, the criminal prosecutions we have already seen against Congresswoman in New Jersey. Everywhere you turn, the tapestry of American democracy is being unraveled. And so we would hope that the large institutions would stand up against this. You'd hope that big law firms would be rushing to defend. You'd hope that media companies would be rushing to provide accurate coverage of what's happening. You'd hope that the universities would be at the forefront of leading movements of young people to fight back and stand up against this. But none of that's happening because the largest institutions in our country are the most guilty of doing the least when they are available to do the most. Yeah. Instead, it is falling to everyday citizens. It's falling to the people watching this videos. It is falling to the Beto O'Rourkes. It is falling to the Brian Tyler Cohens and the Marc Eliases on our YouTube channels. It is falling to all of us to pick up the weight. But there is no guarantee that over the next 3.5 years, this won't get much worse. It probably will get much worse. But we need to celebrate the Representative MacGyvers, the Beto O'Rourkes, the Senator Padillas, and the independent media outlets that are willing to stand tall, even as democracy all around us seems more and more in trouble.
Well, look, all of that underscores the immense need that we have right now for voices like yours. And so one small step that everybody who's watching right now can take to elevate your voice is to subscribe to your YouTube channel, Democracy Docket. I'm going to put a link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, but again, it's a great way to support Marc's work and to get his voice out there in the political zeitgeist more and more. And it's never been more needed than it is right now. So again, that link is on the screen and also in the post description. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.